Welcome to the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculty's podcast.
Welcome to the second series of the NONPF podcast, created by the Simulation Committee of NONPF. This year, our podcast series, titled In the Trenches, Confessions and Pearls of NP Simulationists, will center around the 2023 fall release of the NONPF Guide to Nurse Practitioner Simulations, a step-by-step approach. This guide, an e-learning book, was created by the NONPF Simulation Committee. The e-book is formatted to help NP faculty design effective, measurable simulations that address learner programmatic and national level competencies. Led by members of the current Simulation Committee, podcast moderators invite authors of the ebook to share pearls of approaching simulation from the perspective of the nurse practitioner.
Welcome everyone, I'm Elaine Kauschinger and I will be the moderator today for the ebook chapter focusing on debriefing. We will be going over the objectives of the ebook, defining debriefing. We're going to be sharing examples of debriefing methods in addition to applications of NP teaching. We have experts in the area of simulation, and so what I'd like to do is go ahead and ask each individual to introduce themselves, as well as to provide some of the background and your experience with debriefing in simulation. So if we could perhaps start off with Mary Lauren.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Pfieffer, and I'm an associate professor at Vanderbilt University School of Nursing in Nashville. And I am excited to be here today to talk about simulation and debriefing. I've been involved in the world of simulation since 2014 with running simulations and primarily for the Family Nurse Practitioner program. My interest in simulation spanned through my DNP program and really helped me learn some of the methodologies and approaches to not only debriefing, but just the entire simulation process.
Thank you so very much. And Jeannie Rodriguez, if you'll introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Elaine, for having me here today. My name is Jeannie Rodriguez. I'm an associate professor at Emory University in Atlanta. And I'm also a member of the NONPF Simulation Committee. So my journey with simulation actually just began a few years ago when our program transitioned, as a lot of people did, to online with intensives. So part of that is delivering intensives with some high quality simulation. So I really had to learn from the beginning how to do that. And I think a tricky part of that is learning how to do an effective debrief with students, and how real critically important that process is. I've certainly been on a journey, had other mentors help me learn how to do that. Certainly, NONPF has a plethora of resources on debrief, which was very helpful for me as well, and just kind of immersing myself in that process too. So that's how I came to do what I do, and we do a lot of simulation, obviously, with that intensive model. So it gives me an opportunity to really refine those skills.
Great. Thank you so much. And finally, Jenny O'Rourke.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. I'm Jeannie O'Rourke. I'm an associate professor at Loyola University in Chicago, and I'm going to date myself. I've actually been involved in simulation since 2008. When I started, I was working with faculty, working with NP students, and it became my dissertation topic. And I have not left my passion, love for working and researching in simulation. And I've been involved in a fair amount of running simulations. I was the director of a simulation center at my previous job. And I've developed some learning modules and such with simulation. And I'm also a proud member of the NONPF Simulation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So as you can see, we have lots of experience and lots of expertise. I'd like to now go over to some of the questions that we have, and anyone can, of course, answer. What do you think are some of the essential elements of an effective debriefing session for our NP students?
Thanks, Elaine. I'll kind of begin to answer this question. So I think, there are a lot of important elements to consider when kind of getting the debrief going. I think most importantly, it's kind of setting the scene and making sure everybody feels like they're on the same playing field. I always like to say, mistakes are going to be discussed during this time, and it's going to be a learning experience for everyone here. So once that's kind of said and everybody feels good about that, I allow students to kind of share their emotions and their reactions to the simulation. A lot of our high fidelity simulations are summative in nature. So there's a lot of emotion tied to these, because it's tied to their grades and really their overall experience as a student. So I think it's good to kind of get those feelings projected before you get down to the nitty gritty of the case. Once you kind of get that done, then, having a plan for the debrief is important. So we'll talk later, I hope, about some of the methods and types of debriefing tools to use, but I utilize the PEARLS technique often. And so, we have a student summarize the case and then talk about like learned experiences, things that were learned, and then definitely how to approach the patients in the future if you were to have a patient with the exact same scenario again.
Great. That was wonderful information. Going on to another area, can anyone describe debriefing and really how it's used to promote transition of nurse practitioner students from nursing to the nurse practitioner role?
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that, Elaine. So I think, one of the key parts in that transition from being a nurse, maybe working on a floor, to being a nurse practitioner is really grasping that understanding of that diagnostic process. A lot of our students really struggle as they make that transition and learning that. And I think debriefing is a great place to kind of pull some of that in. So as you're debriefing a student on a scenario, taking time to say, what were the important signs and symptoms that patient presented with today? How do we prioritize that? How do we come up with a differential? What are our differential? Let's pull out the whiteboard and write that down, right? Kind of really getting into that process. Now, can we make a working diagnosis, or do we have to get diagnostics, and what diagnostics, and tell me why you chose the diagnostics that you chose. So it really kind of gives us that opportunity to walk them through that process. They may be somewhat familiar with as an RN, but they aren't using on a case-by-case basis necessarily like you would do for a nurse practitioner.
Great. Wonderful, wonderful suggestions. And thank you for providing that. Mm-hmm. And then on to the other end of the spectrum is about misconceptions or pitfalls that nurse practitioner faculty, especially those who are really new to this, they may encounter when they're debriefing simulation scenarios. Any suggestions?
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in. And I'm going to piggyback on what Mary Lauren had alluded to when she was talking about kind of setting up your debriefing from the beginning, is that really it should be theory-based. You should have a standardized method of debriefing in your center. Faculty, students should be aware of what that method is, so there's consistency every time they kind of understand what the plan is with your debriefing. So theory-based simulation or theory-based debrief. The other thing that the ebook chapter has is it gives a list of the more common types of debriefs that are used by nurse educators. Now there's a lot, and there's some homegrown products, but the ebook chapter just kind of touches on a select number of those. And so it really provides novice educators with a way to then maybe look some of those up and dive deeper in what would be a fit for the program.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, no, so I was going to say, so in talking about pitfalls, one pitfall is not using a standardized debriefing method and kind of going rogue, which I don't recommend. You should always start with the objectives in mind with your simulation. And that starts in your pre-brief when you set those objectives up, and then it translates into your debrief. So using the objectives to guide a debrief is really crucial, because it is kind of easy to get off target or detoured if a student brings up something that's maybe not related specifically to the objectives. And it's okay to respond to that, but you also kind of want to remind yourself you need to focus on those objectives. The other kind of common thing I've seen, although more so in my early years of simulation, is when the faculty facilitators approach the simulation as more of a content expert than a facilitator. And so it can quickly move from this conversation where it should be student-centered and focused to really the faculty leading the conversation and, intruding the focus really on the content from their expertise. And so those are just some of the pitfalls I've seen, but I'd love to hear Jeannie and Mary Lauren, because I'm sure we've all seen a lot of things we would never repeat.
Yeah, I think what you said, it's really important, Jenny. I oftentimes, because, we, as faculty, we're probably experienced clinicians, we do have expertise in that area. And I think students are used to that classroom format where I just tell them everything I know. And that's not what you're doing in a debrief. And so I oftentimes have students we'll be talking about a particular case, and they'll turn and they'll say, what should we do? Or what would you do? Right. And it's not really what debrief is about. It's about saying, well, what would you do as a student? And if you're not sure, let's talk about it as a group. Right. And so it's hard sometimes to, sit on your hands and say, I'm not, not going to just take over here. But that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I mean, I feel like it's so hard for us as educators to be quiet at the front of the room, and so allowing for that student reflection may take longer than like the uncomfortable minute or two of silence that we are wanting to sit there and do. But that's going to allow that reflection period piece. And so that, pausing before we speak is a huge thing that I talk to my debrief facilitators about, just giving that adequate time. I think a common misconception about debrief too is that it's really hard to do with large volumes of students. And so I do think it's important, if you're going to not be the only one leading the debrief, is to have everybody on the same page working through the same plan. So really having meetings with your debrief team before the debrief starts. So either you're doing a peer debrief with 2 faculty per larger student group, or you're having separate rooms where the debriefs are occurring. Just making sure everybody's on the same page is really going to ensure that your debrief is appropriate for the students and will get what you want across to them.
Jenny, I'd like to go back to a remark you had made, and also to help the audience find the resource you mentioned, the new NONPF ebook. Could you let them know where to find it, and also the name of the book?
Absolutely, I'd love to, Elaine. So as members of the NONPF Simulation Committee, all of us were involved in creating this ebook from some capacity. And so there is a ebook that is available on the NONPF website. It is for purchase for members and non-members. And it's really a phenomenal resource for novice simulation educators, but also for seasoned educators, as they potentially are training new educators and kind of looking at mapping curriculum to simulation. And we use a case actually throughout the ebook to really help faculty understand how to implement all of these standards and processes throughout the case design. So I highly recommend the ebook, and these podcasts are really just to give you a tickle of some of the information that is in there. But we do hope you go and take a look at the book.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks for that plug.
And now we have time for one more question. Anyone referring to other resources or tools NP faculty can use to enhance their debriefing skills and improve simulation teaching. We just focused on the ebook from NONPF, but any other resources that you would suggest from your perspective?
Yeah, I do want to mention that NONPF has a simulation SIG, or special interest group, and they meet once a month, usually in the evening time. So we certainly encourage you to take a look at that. That's an opportunity to get together with other people who are doing simulation and really interested and excited about its simulation, and you just talk about different topics around that every month. So it's a good networking opportunity, and you oftentimes learn some additional things there as well. And then too, I think the simulation committee has their webpage too that has a lot of resources that are available.
On that, the resources include examples of training programs that faculty can go to for additional really in-depth training. It has some examples of tools you can use in simulation. Lots and lots of resources that are freely available for NONPF members.
Okay. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the panel experts for coming today and sharing just a wealth of information, and like to thank our audience for the time and attention listening to our podcast, and hopefully you'll be completing the rest of the podcast in the series. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today to hear from our NONPF simulation experts. This podcast has been written, directed, and produced by David House, Jenny O'Rourke, Elaine Kauschinger, Tedra Smith, Jeannie Rodriguez, Leanne Barfield, and Queen Henry-Okafor. Special thanks to NONPF CEO Mary Beth Bigley. The digital ebook is available for purchase on the NONPF website to both members and non-members. The opinions expressed in this podcast series or any product mentioned are not specifically endorsed by NONPF.